And we are live. Thank you so much and sorry for the delay. Also from my side, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for being here and for taking the time. My name is 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐥𝐢. I'm the president of the European Union of Jewish Students. And I have the huge pleasure of hosting today's event together with the German Union of Jewish Students, the 𝐆𝐫𝐞𝐻, the Italian Union of Jewish Students, 𝐄𝐥𝐢, the Austrian Union of Jewish Students, 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐚𝐭, and the Belgian Union of Jewish Students, 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐸, and last but not least, the Spanish Union of Jewish Students. So one might ask, after I have now talked about many European countries, why are all these European young Jews hosting an event on Israeli elections? Most of us can't vote, most of us are not Israelis, most of us have lived in Europe all of our lives. But I think that our opinions as young Jews in the diaspora still matter very much. And sometimes from some sides you hear, and when you engage in these discussions, when you start speaking about Israel and the place of diaspora Jewry in it, then why don't you move to Israel when you want to weigh in? And of course, that's an option. But I also think that at the same time, that while we don't know the realities of living in Israel, it is also important what we have to say, because it is true that the diaspora, we in the diaspora, especially in Europe, very much need Israel. But at the same time, it's also true that Israel very much needs the diaspora. And because Israel is not just another country, but aims to be a safe harbor for all Jewish people, no matter where they are living, I do think that our opinions also matter. Because we are the future, and in many cases the present, of that European diaspora. So especially in these times where we sometimes feel that there is a growing rift between Israel and some parts of the diaspora, it was of huge importance to us to organize such an event where we give young European Jews the chance of challenging candidates for Knesset on issues that are of importance to them. As Gal has said, we'll be welcoming candidates in a town hall format tonight with young European Jews asking questions to the candidates. We reached out to all relevant parties, some of which, including the Likud and the Joint List, were unfortunately not able to join us tonight, but I'm even happier for the parties and the representatives who joined us tonight. So a huge thank you to New Hope, to Meretz, to Blue and White, to Yesh Atid, to Yamina, and to Labour, who have all taken the time and have all showed that they care about what diaspora Jews think, what young Jews think. And without further ado, over to you, Gal, for the first round of questions.
Thank you so much, Bini. So with us today, our first runner-up is member of Knesset Sharren Haskel, number 5 on New Hope's party list. Sharren, the floor is yours. Is Sharren with us here? She's saying she's having some trouble. Sorry. She'll be right up. Okay, so since Sharren is having some issues, I think we better start with someone we already have here. Ruth, are you ready for us?
Ruth, you're muted at the moment. You just need to unmute yourself.
Yes, yes. I just managed to unmute myself.
So our first runner-up would be Ruth Wasserman-Lande, number 10 on Kahol Lavan's list. Ruth, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So first of all, good evening, everyone. As someone who grew up in South Africa, in the diaspora, I am extremely touched by all of you who are spending time and energy doing things for Israel with your energy, with your enthusiasm, with your intelligence. It's not a given, and I want to say that I appreciate it very much from a very deep and personal place. So thank you. That's first and foremost. I grew up in a Russian-speaking home to parents who made Aliyah from Lithuania in the early 70s. And when I was a little child, they moved to South Africa. That's why I speak like I do. And when I was 17, I finished high school and I did what I knew I would do since the age of 8, which was to come back to Israel to make Aliyah. I did that on my own, and I was a lone soldier. In fact, I did my army service, and I was an officer. I left the army when in the ranking as a captain, and I wanted to serve and do something for the benefit of the state of Israel. So I entered the cadet course of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, spent years there, served in the Israeli embassy in Cairo. I was the deputy ambassador for a while. I also served as the advisor of President Shimon Peres, quite an experience in and within itself, and spent quite a few years as Deputy Director General of the Federation of Local Governments in Israel, learning, let's say, the arena of the local governance in the country. I also spent a lot of time, and I think that's important for what we'll talk about, working amidst the different towns and cities in the north and the south, the center and the periphery, particularly the lower socioeconomic end of the line and in the Arab sector, forwarding and promoting, in fact, economic engines of growth, trying to work on projects of empowerment for youth, and so on and so forth. Another thing that I did is I studied another second degree. The first one was in Jerusalem at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government within the 𝐄𝐥𝐬 Fellowship. And last but not least, I even managed to do my pre-doc studies at Oxford University. Why am I telling you all this? Because I entered politics. First of all, I was not born in politics, which is important to what I'll be saying. I spent a lot of time working in Israeli society, in the Israeli street, prior to my entry into politics, and I believe I'll continue as long as I'm capable. And the one thing that really enticed me to joining the Blue and White Party from the start, Benny Gantz's part of the initially tripartite coalition of Yesh Atid and �כחול לבן and Telem, was the fact that we were talking about former chief of staff, a Zionistic yet pragmatic person of vision, somebody who gave a lot of himself and his life to the Israeli arena, the public arena. I connected to those values, to giving to society, to the pragmatism, to the fact that the party was central. It was not far right, it was not far left. For me, as somebody who made Aliyah, and as a staunch Zionist who's also serving in the as a reservist, as a captain in the IDF, and really trying to do whatever I can for society here in Israel, I think that the fact that this is a party which is attempting to bring together all walks of life from the Israeli arena, rather than really putting a kind of a highlight on one part of society while negating another. This is something that I feel is not for me and not for the need of Israel, which is unification of the different tribes, much like the president, Rivlin, has said, we need to unite. Our strength, not only in Israel, but also abroad, of the Jewish peoplehood in general, is to unite and thereby be stronger in promoting Israel as a sanctuary for Jewish people throughout the world. I think I'll stop here, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. By the way, having served for 3 years as an Israeli Jewish woman in Cairo, I don't think you'll be able to ask a question which is too difficult or too undiplomatic for me. So I encourage you to ask as difficult a question as possible. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you for being with us. And the first question comes from 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐸𝐫, who is part of the board of the Austrian Union of Jewish Students.
Hi, Victoria.
Hello, thank you very much for having me here. As said, I'm 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐸𝐫. I'm from the Austrian Union of Jewish Students. And my question for today is, one of the topics of �Кaḥoľ-LaVan's election program is the willingness to negotiate a deal to resolve the conflict with Palestine. What does �Кaḥoľ-LaVan bring to the table in the peace negotiations, what Netanyahu and others before him didn't bring, which is going to make a difference?
Okay, so first of all, the whole, I would say, stance of the Blue and White Party is that of pragmatism. On the one hand, Benny Gantz has tremendous experience in the security field, in the strategic understanding of the region as a whole, and of course the bilateral relations between us and the Palestinians. I think that he was key, together with 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐚𝐥𝐢, the foreign minister, in stopping the annexation. In fact, that was one of the main direct results of entering this government and stopping the annexation. And next came the Abraham Accords, which are tremendously important to the region as a whole. In fact, I see them as game-changing and groundbreaking. Furthermore, I would say that Blue and White Party believes in direct negotiations. In other words, attempting to force a negotiation is out of the question on the one hand, while pragmatism, for instance, giving vaccination to medical teams, opening up and resuming the security coordination after 8 months of a lockdown between Israel and Palestinian Authority, that was something that the Ministry of Defense in Israel, headed by Benny Gantz, definitely can say is one of its main achievements. Furthermore, something like the ICC in The Hague trying to influence Israel by reprimanding it for certain actions is something we do not view as useful at all for any kind of cooperation and moving forward in the region.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, and thank you both. And next up, we have David Fiorentini from Italy.
Hello, good evening to everyone. Yes, I'm David Fiorentini. I'm the president of 𝐄𝐥𝐢, the Italian Union of Jewish Students. And I've got here the question that we wanted to ask, which is, the state of Israel has a big problem of political instability and uncertainty. The government keeps falling, and thinking about a concrete solution is really difficult. Despite this fact, Israel seems to have found a way out from the COVID situation, and it's universally recognized as an avant-garde and an example. How can you explain this unique phenomenon?
Okay. So one thing I can tell you is that being in Israel, you can absolutely never in your entire life be bored. I think in Italy, it's quite astoundingly interesting too, but in Israel, complexity is the name of the game, and the political system is definitely complex. The coalition system makes it rather complex, and therefore instability is almost inherent. Yet, the fact that we continue to go into one election after another is not a given. It's not a matter of this is the way it is and we need to accept it. No, we need to move forward. And you asked a very good question about how did we manage, despite the very difficult, complex situation and the pandemic, to be the leading, maybe one of the leading, if not the leading country in terms of vaccination and so on. One thing I'd like to say is that the home front of the IDF, Pיקוד העורף, took a huge command over the civil society, having at times 4 number of tests, corona tests, performed on people, on the general population. This is not something to be looked at lightly. For instance, my parents who live currently in LA, nobody is undergoing a test. I mean, to go through a test is quite a nightmare, not to mention being vaccinated. The distribution of vaccinations, the issue of working with the civil society, particularly from an organization like the IDF, the Home Front Command, is something which I'm very proud to say the head of my party, Blue and White, was one of the first people to recognize as something that could be extremely helpful and very organized in a manner of speaking. And I think that that is one of the achievements of Israel as a whole in terms of the organization, in terms of being a leader worldwide in terms of vaccinations.
Thank you very much for your answer. I think it
Thank
really
you.
explains what we were looking for in this situation. Yes.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our time is unfortunately up because we have so many candidates and so little time. But feel free to also, to the people viewing out there, submit your questions via the Q&A function so that we can also put them to the candidates. Ruth Wasserman-Lande, thank you so much for joining us. And good
It
luck.
was my pleasure. I'm sending you all big hugs because I think what you're doing in all of your countries is exquisite. It's amazing. Kol hakavod.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Shalom.
Shalom.
So our next runner-up is member of Knesset Sharren Haskel, number 5 on New Hope's party's list. Sharren, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So this is just an introduction first to everybody. All right. My name is Sharren Haskel. I'm a former member of Knesset. I'm today on the list of the New Hope Party. I'm located at number 5. I was born in Canada. And I immigrated with my family when I was a year old to Israel. I spent, I grew up here in Israel, and I served in my military service as a combat soldier in Israel. I am the first member of parliament that served in its military service as a combat soldier. I'm very proud of. And after my military service, I lived for about 7 years in Australia. I worked, I studied there, and then moved back to Israel, back home. This is a little bit about my background internationally. The only other thing I would add is that my mom is a new Ola. She's not anymore a new Ola, but she immigrated to Israel also when I was a year old. She grew up in France. She was born in Morocco and grew up in France and moved here to Israel after I was born. So for the past 6 years, I served in the Israeli Knesset. I served for those 6 years as a parliament member from the Likud party. I'm very well, my main goals or my main legislations are in regards to economical liberties and individual liberties. Just yesterday was announced that I won the 8th time as a parliamentarian, as the most liberal parliamentarian in the Knesset of Israel, which I'm very proud of because it does show me the way that I've made an ideological way, and I walked that path through my entire political career. And this is something I'm very proud of. Most of my legislations were on the reduction of bureaucracy, of regulations, taxes, opening Israeli markets that are very condensed. We have here in Israel many monopolies, triopolies in different industries. And so one of my main goals is to liberate the Israeli economy. Except of these legislations, I've also have led I would call it the reform in anything to do with cannabis, so decriminalization of cannabis and legalization of cannabis here in Israel. I was chairing the caucus for medicinal cannabis as well. And I'm very proud of my work where 6 years ago, no members of Knesset would even speak about these issues. Maybe some 2-3 Knesset members in regards of medicinal cannabis. The work that I've done in the past 6 years have led to the point where 2 years ago, when we went into elections, almost all the parties have mentioned the issues of legalizing cannabis or decriminalization of cannabis users here in Israel, which I'm extremely proud of. Beside that, a lot of my work is surrounding foreign affairs and defense. I sat for 6 years in the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, and in the last Knesset, I was chairing the Committee for International Affairs. It is a subcommittee of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, and I was Deputy Speaker of the Knesset. 3 months ago, I resigned from my seat in the Knesset and gave my mandate back to the Likud party, which I decided to leave in order to join 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐴 in his road to the prime ministership of the state of Israel. I believe that he is the change that we need here in our country. We need a leadership, an ideological leadership with a backbone, a straight person who really can lead Israel into not just a better future, but also to get us out of this economical crisis and the health crisis that we're facing today. He's the only candidate that in the political reality can challenge Netanyahu seats as prime minister. And it's not a simple road. It was a difficult decision to make, but after seeing, unfortunately, some of the red lines that Netanyahu had crossed especially in the recent months, but also in the last 2 years, we really felt that this is the thing that we have to do for our country and for our people as well. So I'll conclude here, and I see we want to move into questions as well, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you've got.
Thank you so much, Sharon Haskel, for joining us and for being willing to answer questions. Just to let you all know, we have almost 100 people watching live across all platforms. So this was definitely an event that people are interested in. It shows that young European Jews want to shape the debate on how Israel looks. And without further ado, that brings me to the first person who's going to ask you a question, Juan from Spain.
Well, thank you very much for being here, Mrs. Haskel, and you, yes, for organizing this incredible event. I'm the president of the political section of 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐚𝐞, which is the Federation of Young Jews of Spain. So my question is the following. It truly is admirable that your party decided to break with Netanyahu after so many years of working closely together, as you pointed out. The party has restated multiple times that by no means you will form a coalition government with Bibi as long as he is still indicted by the Attorney General. Gantz also said that up until a year ago, repetitively and countless times, and we saw what happened in the end. So my question is the following. If it came to that scenario, would you be willing to form a coalition with left-wing parties or even a mix of right-wing and left-wing parties rather than one with a party like the Likud that is much more alike to the ideas that you guys defend?
We will not form a coalition with Netanyahu. This is something that I can assure you. We are not political rookies like Blue and White, who came with no parliamentarian, no political experience at all. We spent quite a lot of time with Bibi. 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐴 has served our country in so many important and challenging intersections throughout the recent 20 years. He is the only person who have not just challenged, but actually won Netanyahu on different political battles as well. And so New Hope Party is a party that has the experience, know how to triumph also political conflict against Netanyahu. And that's why also this is the only option to actually change the government and change Bibi. 𝐵𝐸𝐫𝐚𝐞 is the only candidate that can actually do that. Now, we didn't choose not to sit with Bibi because his indictment. Legally, he's allowed to continue to be a prime minister, but we're talking of something much more severe. What we've seen as crossing red lines, we speak about Netanyahu that we see today is not the Netanyahu that we knew before, and that's why he's changed the Likud party that we grew up in, that we loved so much, into a different party. We saw him putting his personal and political interest ahead of our country's interests. Netanyahu, who is so well known in Israel's economy, has chosen not to pass a budget, our country's budget, during an economical crisis. I mean, and that was only for a political gain. This is something that Netanyahu that we knew would have never done. This is a red line that we could not ignore. And this is just one of many things that we've seen along the way, that we understood that he is not healthy anymore for our country and for our people. And therefore, we have split and left the Likud party and have chosen to challenge him on the prime ministership. Now, the coalition that we will build, first of all, I will just say it again, we will not sit under his leadership because it is not healthy for our country. The only other option in Israel, well, there's two options. One of them is that he will win and we will sit in the opposition. The other option, and it's the only option, is that 𝐵𝐸𝐫𝐚𝐞 will form the next coalition. No one in the political arena have the opportunity or the capability of surrounding him with 61 seats that will support him as a prime minister. He's the only one. And therefore, we definitely are open for different kinds of coalition. 𝐵𝐸𝐫𝐚𝐞 have more than 76 seats that he can actually add and subtract in order to form a government. The two first partners that we will turn to are Naftali Bennett on the one hand and Yair Lapid on the other hand, in order to first of all create a stable government that will take Israel out of this cycle of elections after elections. I mean, this is a mad situation that Israel is facing, especially particularly during this crisis, this world crisis, to go time and time again into elections. Israel needs stability, not just the government stability, but this instability, create instabilities in our own life. And so our main goal is to build the biggest possible and the most stable government that's going to unify our people. We have 7 principles that speaks about a Jewish state and a democratic state that puts Israel's economy at first. We have a whole plan on how to take Israel out of the economical crisis, about Israel's safety and security internationally, not just military-wise and security, but also from an economical point of view, technologically, and there's more sides to that. And there's a few other steps that we put as a foundation for our future coalition. But yet, except of extremes party who don't see eye to eye on those issues, we're definitely open for negotiation with different parties. And this is in regards, on the contrary to Netanyahu, where he has to turn into very extreme voices in Israel in order to form a coalition.
Thank you, Sharon, for this. We have a second question. Bini, please.
Yes, thank you so much for that answer. The next question comes from Jacob from Germany.
Hi, Sharon, shalom. Thanks for coming to speak, and thank you for 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐚𝐿 for doing this event. My name is Jacob. I'm representing the 𝐗SUD, the Jewish Student Union of Germany. And I have a question. So as we know, there's been a housing crisis in Israel in the last few years that has caused quite a few problems. Lots of Israelis live in the center of Israel and in Tel Aviv. And this is basically inflating the real estate prices and causing a whole problem. While in the north and south of Israel, that we know as the periphery, there's less investment, and also the infrastructure is less good in comparison to the center of Israel. The vision of Ben-Gurion was that the south would be a place full of people and thriving. So, Ms. Haskel, it's also interesting to know your libertarian view on this, as we know the Socialist Party's view of putting a stop to certain rent prices, to put like a limit. What would be your party's way of tackling these issues and improving the infrastructure of the periphery?
Okay, that's a great question. And it's a question that we actually put in our platform as well, because it's a serious issue for the younger generation here in Israel. So we have a plan on how to invest in the periphery, specific investments in the big metropolises in the periphery, so in the north and in the south, and turn them into hub centers for work, for the judicial systems, for government offices, for art, for students. Instead of having one center like Tel Aviv and investing a lot of resources there, we are going to divide it in order to create a few centers like Tel Aviv, but also in the south and in the north. This way, first of all, the housing issues that are mainly centered in Tel Aviv will get a bit of sort of like, I would say, a room to breathe, okay? And more people will want to move into other areas in Israel, and that will release some of the pressure on housing that we have also in the center of Israel, and we'll be able to give a younger generation affordable housing in those areas, but also providing him the surrounds that they need as work, art, cultural activities, infrastructures, education, and things like that. So this is an important key part in our platform that we put of Tikva Chadasha. The other one is a few sections in there that we speak about a program to assist first home buyers here in Israel. Okay. Another one is the regulation and the bureaucracy. Anyone who visited Israel knows how much insane bureaucracy we have here. And now you need to understand, it's not just the way to reduce the prices of housing is creating a bigger, not the hetza. I don't have the word now.
Supply, bigger supply.
Thank you, Gal. Supply, a bigger supply. So we need to get into building massively in Israel in order to expand the supply and then reduce the prices as well. And so for that, we have a plan of reducing 30% of the regulation on building houses today, which is insane. Taking all the authorities from different offices in the government and putting them under one roof. So people who wants to develop and have big projects of development of building housing won't have years and years of bureaucracy and regulations that they have to pass before they even put the first tractor on the land in order to start building houses. So reduce bureaucracy and regulations. The other one is investing in a specific project in Israel. It's called the Pinui Binui and Tama 38. These are specific projects in very old neighborhoods from the 50s, okay? not just improving them, but also building on top of these buildings, either destroying, it's a 3-story buildings, completely destroy them and then building up on the top instead of 3 levels, 6 levels, and 8 levels, or taking a 3-story building and just building on top of it while you're reinforcing the basic structure. So we have a plan on how to expand this program in order to continue and expand the supply of housing here in Israel. So this is just in a nutshell some of our plans about housing.
Thank you so much, Sharon Haskell, for joining us. We have again run out of time. I'm realizing these conversations are so interesting that we should maybe host a second edition to go more in depth. But unfortunately, we are out of time today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Our next guest is Mr. Uri Zaki of Meretz. Uri Zaki, are you here? The floor is yours.
I think Uri is here.
I start my video. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. So my name is Uri Zaki. I'm representing the Meretz Party. I'm not a candidate on this election, although I was a few cycles back. I'm the chair of the Meretz Executive Board, and I'm also I held several positions in the Meretz Party throughout the years, including being the chair of Young Meretz, and this is quite long ago, about 15, 16 years ago I was elected. And I was also the vice president of Ms. Jacinda Ardern. When she was the president of UC, the International Union of Socialist Youth, I was her vice president, which I'm very proud of, especially now when she's become what she became, but also when it was going on. I'm also leading a nonprofit called the Front for the Protection of Democracy, which deals with threats on Israeli democracy from populist elements within the Israeli political spectrum. Meretz is I don't know how much you're familiar with Meretz. As you know, Israel has a multi-partisan system in which many elements of the political ideology in Israel are represented. And Meretz is the sole party, I would say, that represents itself as a left party, not center-left, not left-center, not center, not anything like that. We are proud of being the representing the left in Israel. That means many things, both what you're familiar with, of course, in European politics, strong obligation to social rights, social justice, social democracy, human rights, equality, and everything that there is from that. And of course, within the special Israeli context, the major issue is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, where, why am I not in the center of the, hold on, I'll do that. Oh, sorry. In the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Meretz actually was founded as a union between 3 different parties in the early 90s that all combined in the wish that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can only be solved through a formation of a Palestinian state next to the state of Israel. We see the Israeli occupation of the Palestinians in the West Bank as a moral, political, and a security as an existential threat to the state of Israel, something that is not viable, something that is ruining the Israeli democracy and stability from within. And we strive to end this occupation, again, with a formation of a Palestinian state as the only solution that will guarantee Israel as the Jewish democratic homeland that it is. That's the true Zionist vision, and that's what we're trying to basically maintain. And we cannot do that while controlling militarily almost 2 million people, or excuse me, over 2 million people within the West Bank. So that's about a bit about me and about Meretz. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, 𝐿𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐚, for joining us and for giving us that overview. The first question comes from Belgium. Terence from Belgium, please.
Hello, I'm Terence. I'm from the Union of Jewish Students in Belgium. So, Uri, the president of Meretz, Nitzan Horowitz, declared recently that he was seeking the education ministry if Meretz was to enter the government. Can you explain what has been done wrong in the past related to education and what the Meretz education minister would do?
Sure. Again, somehow it doesn't go automatically. Sure. First of all, in all the governments that Meretz was part of, Meretz held the position of the Minister of Education. That is under Rabin in '92 and under Barak in '99. In fact, Meretz's ministers of education, who were usually the chairs of the party, are considered the best ministers of education Israel has ever had. If it's Shulamit Aloni, who founded Meretz, the first chair of Meretz, if it's Amnon Rubinstein, and if it's Yossi Sarid, three really remarkable figures that changed the Israeli educational system. I'll give you an example. For instance, before Israel only had universities, it didn't have colleges. So, with a small amount of universities, you can't bring or you can't supply the demand of higher education in Israel. Once Meretz established, this is under Amnon Rubinstein, the colleges in Israel, many young people from the periphery in Israel, there's a big tension in Israel between the center and the periphery. Many people from development towns, from the Israeli cultural and geographical periphery, achieved higher education. And part of the revolution we see now, where more and more folks from not the center of Israel, but from its periphery are now holding degrees and are part of the economy, the culture, and the political arena in Israel. And that's part of the fruit of what Meretz has done. We do that because at the end of the day, education is the most important element in securing a healthy, just society. If more and more people would gain access to education from all ages, starting from the age of 0 up to the age of higher education and PhD and you name it, then you have better chances to succeed in life, to fulfill your abilities. So that's why we strive to lead the educational system in Israel. We have a very thorough plan for education, basically providing much more quality in education and much more widespread. I mean, Israel does have free education, but it's limited in many ways and it's distorted in many ways. We offer to open it up, to make it more affordable, to make it truly free, and to have a very strong educational system in Israel.
Thank you so much for the answer already. I just have a quick follow-up on education. As you said, that it fosters the next generation and also helps create narratives for Israelis of all sides. And it creates narratives on many different topics, including how to view the different communities in Israel, how to view the idea of coexistence. So what do you think of the actual education programs, books, curriculums that exist now in Israel, and what should be improved?
And I'll have to ask you for a short answer because we have very limited time.
Got it. So listen, we have, in many of the past governments under Netanyahu and even before, the education ministry went to conservative religious parties, and that had its impact on the educational system. Even, I know Sharren Haskel spoke before me, her party's leader, Mr. Gideon Sa'ar, when he was the Minister of Education, for instance, he made it compulsory, or at least part of the curriculum, to visit occupied Hebron as part of the curriculum in high schools. This is not something, of course, we want to see. We want to see a liberal, open-minded educational system, which will bring in both Jewish culture on all its spectrum, from religious up to secular, and of course to the universal elements of knowledge, all being part of the educational system. You know, in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox system doesn't teach basic things like math, like English, like sciences. This is unheard of. You know, we make a huge part of our population not able to work ever, because in a modern workforce. So this is what we want to do.
Uri, thank you so much. And I'm really realizing that we need to have a second edition of this, but as there are good chances there will be another election this year, there might be a chance for doing that. Next up is Sashi from Austria.
Hi, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Sashi Turkov, and I am the co-president of the Austrian Union of Jewish Students. And my question regards a human rights issue, more specific, a refugee community issue. Last year, I volunteered at the organization 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐚𝐿 that works with children in refugee communities in South Tel Aviv. And my experience was that they live in horrible conditions, and their communities suffer from neglect and constant fear of deportation. And my question is to you and to Meretz, what policies and which specific approaches has Meretz planned to face this issue?
Sure. Thank you for this question, and I agree with you that the situation there is grim. You know, much like you're Europeans, you know that many times populist right-wing leaders use immigration as a political tool to incite and to divide and to flock support through fear and racism. Unfortunately, Israel is not different in that aspect. You know, the Likud party itself has now a member there, 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐚𝐞𝐥𝐢, who's one of the populist leaders of the incitement effort against the asylum seekers in Israel. Netanyahu, his minister of police, are all aligned with these horrible elements, which don't actually represent the population in South Tel Aviv. You know, only yesterday, MK Tamar Zandberg and MK Yair Golan of Meretz visited South Tel Aviv and met with the leadership of the Israeli community there, who said, you know, our problem is not with the asylum seekers or the labor immigrants. It's with junkies and crime and other stuff that doesn't have to do with them at all. Most of them are families, you know, who have to, you know, who found themselves, whose fate brought them there, and that's not our problem. So, of course, Meretz thinks that this is a horrible situation. In fact, Meretz was the one that, through especially members of Knesset, Mossi Raz and Michal Rozin, who put a spotlight. There was an attempt by the Netanyahu government to deport asylum seekers without even checking their requests to third African countries that they don't have anything to do with, apart from the fact that both are in Africa. And we made a major outcry on that, and it stopped. We have a plan that says several things. First of all, here the requests for Israel has the minimum, if you compare it to the world, actually looking into asylum seekers' requests for asylum. They have to get, for the country for the state to hear their appeals. We're talking about stopping the deportations. We're talking about spreading the asylum seekers community, not only in South Tel Aviv, giving benefits to communities that would absorb asylum seekers to their communities. Of course, letting asylum seekers work in Israel, something that they can't do legally right now, which is crazy. It's crazy. They work, of course, but it's work that is not recognized, and they do it illegally. You can't live in a country without working. So yeah, I see here that I'm running out of time, but I think you get where I'm getting.
Exactly. Thank you so much for answering these questions and for joining us. We really appreciate it, and good luck for the rest of the campaign.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next runner-up is Moshe Kinley of Yesh Atid. Moshe, the floor is yours.
Yes.
Moshe, we can hear you.
Hi, how are you? Good evening. Great to meet you, everybody. So I'm Moshe Kinley. Turpaz Kinley is my nickname. I was born in Philadelphia when my parents were on the shlichut of the Jewish agency. My father worked for 25 years in the Jewish agency, so I feel part of family here. Made Aliyah when I was a year old, and grew up in Haifa and then in Jerusalem. Been learning in the modern Orthodox schools in Israel. We're working in education for the last 24 years, teacher, and then a principal of high school. And I was the head of the educational system of the city of Jerusalem. Served in the reserves army as a commander in the paratroopers for many years. And for the last few years, I've been building a network of schools and joined Yesh Atid party. And through Yesh Atid, I came into parliament for the last 2 months. Been working very hard towards the coming elections. So great to be with you tonight. I'm married to Shlomit. I have 5 children. We live in a kibbutz. That's a bit about me.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. The first question comes from Olaf, who is part of the EUGS board.
Hi, Moshe. I'm Olaf, one of the vice presidents of EUGS. I live in the UK at the moment. And my question is, more and more of my diaspora Jewish friends are worried about the sort of continued right-wing drift in Israel. And at times when I look at Israeli politics and the tone of the debate, Israel, a country that I love and I feel very strongly connected to, feels almost unrecognizable. And a big part of that for me is, the continued occupation of the West Bank and the peace between Israelis and Palestinians looking further than ever. So my question to you is the nation state law and the continued expansion of settlements the main threat to the legitimacy of Zionism internationally, especially among young progressives in Europe? And put simply, are more right-wing governments led by the likes of Netanyahu a threat to Zionism itself?
Okay, so thank you very much, Olaf, for your question. And I'll say, you actually asked, I think, 3 questions, which go to one theme, but again, on 3 specific issues. So I will start with the nation state law. As I see it, the nation state law was a big mistake, both morally and politically. I'm talking to you after a long day I've been having in the north of Israel, in the Galil, going through Arab and Jews villages and speaking to leaders from the communities. I have a great friend we learned together in Harvard a few years ago, and he's a principal of the 𝐵𝐲𝐬 hospital. His name is Salman Zarqa, and he used to be a Druze officer in the army, He's a doctor, and today he's a principal of the hospital. And he told me, Kinny, that's my nickname. He said, look, I was so offended to wake up one day and to find out that I'm second best. I can't be equal in my country. And I think many non-Jews and Jews feel like that. And one of the first things we in Yesh Atid hope to do when we get into government, hopefully we'll be forming the government, the next government, will to cancel the nation-state law or to add the theme of equity into it, which are both are, I think, legitimate options. Saying Israel is a country for everybody, no matter what your, whether you're Jewish or Arab or whatever. Now, you asked about the settlements and you asked about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and these are big questions, and I have a few minutes to answer. I'll just say this. I think, in opposed to maybe Uri Zaki before me, I don't see all settlements as one issue, as one place, and I don't see the Israeli-Palestinian conflict always connected to the issue of settlements, meaning I think Israel has forgotten for the last 25 years the very important word, which is peace. We pray, we say every day in the prayer, we ask for peace a few times. And I think that Israeli government has done no effort to seek for peace between us and the Palestinians. So that is the second main issue I want to tackle and say, the government led by Yesh Atid will seek to promote and to work hard in order to make peace with the Palestinians. Now, settlement is one of the issues between us and the Palestinians. I don't think the most important one. There are more hard ones, and I think settlements are to be deferred between one and another. So Yesh Atid will seek to stop the building in order of Judah and Samaria, and to focus maybe on only the main settlements, that on one hand. And the second one is that we will negotiate with the Palestinians in order to try and make some kind of agreement, which is a hard thing to get, but we believe we can. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that answer. Next up, we have Anna, the president of the German Union of Jewish Students.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much for the very interesting introduction and the answers you just gave. So yeah, as Vinny just said, I'm the president of the German Union of Jewish Students, and I'm very interested to hear what you have to say to this, because you already mentioned a little bit something about the foreign policies, because the last few weeks were, of course, very tense inside Israel, but also in terms of the foreign policy. And we see that the Iranian government is threatening to enrich uranium, and the new US administration, whose new Secretary of State helped to construct the Iran nuclear deal, is also saying that he's basically willing to return to the deal. So my question is, how would Yesh Atid continue the foreign policy of the State of Israel in the Middle East to maybe even build more peace treaties with Arab countries and to avoid Iran from spreading more terror throughout the Middle East?
Thank you, Anna. Okay, again, this is a very big and complex issue, but I'll try to answer in a few sentences. First thing, Israel is a country that seeks peace. And as I said about the Palestinians, we see us as partners, as peace seekers with any country in the region. And that's I think that should be our main goal and set of mind. Iran is heading to build a nuclear bomb, and we can't have Iran have a nuclear bomb or any nuclear other efforts. So we have to stop Iran, and we think that we should work on this issue with the United States and the European governments, and not like Netanyahu did with opposing them. So this is a very delicate balance of working and negotiating on the one hand, but still keeping the army operation option on the table in case Iran goes straight and becomes very close to a nuclear weapon. And this is, I think, there's a big differentiation between the way we treat Iran at the moment, which is a country that seeks and works on an everyday base to try and destroy Israel, in opposed to most Arab countries that we are today negotiating with beyond the table, because we have very strong relations. I know about a few of them, but I don't know about all of them. We have negotiations and connections with many Arab countries that are not formally in contact with Israel. And I see this as a very important issue, and we would like to promote and enlarge the number of countries that have a peace agreement with Israel, and that will be on our main policy in the coming years.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for joining us and for answering all these questions. Also to you, good luck for the rest of the election campaign, and have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, all of you.
So thanks, Moshe, for joining us this evening. And for our next special guest, I would like you to open your subtitle function on Zoom. Shirley Pinto of Yamina is deaf and hard of hearing. Liat Pijot will translate your questions to sign language and then back in Hebrew. Don't worry, we're gonna have Benny Mishkev with us translating everything in closed captions. Shirley, once we get everything technical ready, you're ready to go. I'll let you know when. I'll give you the cue.
Cool. No problem, I will wait.
We should be able to start in just a minute. We're just waiting for the person who's in charge of the closed captions, who should join any minute so that we can actually talk to each other in English and not only in Hebrew, which I fear most participants don't understand. I actually would suggest at this point, Gal, if it's okay with you, that you start translating until...
I'm sorry, can you hear me? This is the transcriber. Please, can you give the permission to...
That's Benny, I presume.
Yes.
Okay, you have a different name, okay? Wait, now perfect. Then I'll make you able to make the closed captions, and then it should be fine. 1 second. Okay, we should be ready to start. If you press the 3 buttons now, you can choose an option to showcase you the closed captions, and then we can start.
I still not get it.
And Benny should be able to put in closed captions now.
Now I can see it. Just a second.
You can begin.
Benny, do I try? Great.
It seems
אז עכשיו אני יכולה לדבר עברית וכתוביות יהיו אנגלית, נכון?
Benny, let's try, please.
Yes, it is working. It is working.
Okay, great.
וכתוביות אצלי קצת הפוכות, אבל לא נורא. אתה רוצה שאני אתחיל? אתם?
No, please go ahead, Shirley. Introduce yourself. Go ahead.
ערב טוב לכולם. תודה על הכבוד להיות פה. קוראים לי שירלי פינטו. אני בת 32, גרה ברמת גן. אני נשואה לבן זוג חירש, וגם יש לנו ילד חירש. תתכוננו, גם ההורים שלי חירשים. אבא שלי הוא חירש, ואימא שלי חירשת עיוורת. ואני גדלתי בבית דובר שפת סימנים. במהלך כל החיים שלי יצאתי למאבקים למען קידום אנשים עם מוגבלויות, ואחרי הצבא החלטתי להקדיש את חיי למטרה הזאת, לא משנה אם זה מתוך הכנסת או מחוץ לכנסת. אני אעשה הכל למען לשנות את מדינת ישראל למדינה נגישה יותר ומכילה יותר. מעל 10 שנים של עשייה בשטח, בקמפיינים, עמותות, ארגונים, הכל בהתנדבות. ב-2019 החלטתי לקפוץ למים העמוקים ולהתמודד לכנסת, והצטרפתי לפוליטיקה כי אני מאמינה שהשינוי באמת צריך להגיע גם לשטח וגם מלמעלה. אבל כל העבודה בשטח, אני עובדת כל כך קשה ומזיעה ומזיזה גרגיר חול. לצד כל זה אני לומדת עכשיו גם תואר שני ביחסי ישראל יהדות ארצות הברית באוניברסיטת חיפה. בחרתי את התחום הזה כי הוא תחום שמאוד מעניין אותי, רציתי אותו כבר הרבה זמן. תואר ראשון למדתי משפטים, תואר שני החלטתי ללמוד את זה, מהסיבה היחידה שאחרי הצבא נחשפתי לעולם מאוד מאוד גדול. טסתי לארצות הברית, טסתי לאירופה, למרכז אירופה, לדרום אמריקה, ובעצם נחשפתי שם כמה אנשים עם מוגבלויות, ושאלתי אותם מה חשיבות הזהות היהודית אצלם, ותתפלאו לשמוע שאצל אנשים עם מוגבלויות, הזהות היהודית לא נמצאת בראש סדר עדיפויות, היא יותר משנית ושולית. יותר חשוב להם כמובן המאבקים של היום-יום, בצדק אני חושבת על עצמי, מאבקי היום-יום, הזכות לקיום, הנגישות בעבודה, בתרבות, המודעות בחברה, והזהות היהודית תופסת מקום משני יותר. וזה גם אחת הסיבות, אני אסביר, הנישואי תערובת בחו"ל אצל אנשים עם מוגבלויות הרבה יותר גבוהה אצל אנשים בלי מוגבלויות. מכמה סיבות. אחת הסיבות היא כמובן עצם זה שאתה עדיין מוגבלות, למצוא זוגיות, יש איזשהו קושי, כי מסתכלים עליך כאדם פגום, בעצם האנשים גם אוהבים למצוא מי שדומה להם. לדוגמה, אנשים חירשים הרבה פעמים יאהבו להיות בן זוג של בן אדם שהוא גם חירש, שמבין אותם, שהוא אותה זהות, אותה תרבות, ובגלל זה הנישואי תערובת והנישואים אם לא מיהודים, אצל אנשים עם מוגבלות הרבה יותר נפוצה. גם אם זה מוגבלות פיזית או שפתית או חושית או כל דבר אחר. וגם עניין המסגרות, למשל בן זוגי, בעלי היום, הוא חירש והוא נולד בארצות הברית, הוא נולד בלוס אנג'לס, המשפחה שלו, כולם, כל האחים שלו נולדו שם, גדלו שם, הוא הילד הרביעי, הוא היחידי החירש במשפחה, וכשהוא נולד, ההורים לא ידעו לאיזה מסגרת לשלוח אותו, היה להם מאוד חשוב גם היהדות, אבל גם החינוך שהוא יהיה נגיש לאנשים חירשים, אז נורא היה עם התלבטות, חינוך יהודי שהוא שומעים, או חינוך שהוא לחירשים שהוא עם כל האוכלוסייה. איך לשמר על הזהות היהודית, אז הוא היה בבוקר פה, בצהריים שם, והיה לו מאוד מאוד קשה. בארצות הברית לא הייתה אז מסגרת שהיא גם יהודית, וגם נותנת מענה לאנשים חירשים. אז הם החליטו אחרי שנים שהם חיו בארצות הברית לעזוב ולעשות עלייה לארץ ישראל, במטרה לתת למייקל בעלי את המסגרת הראויה והתומכת, ואני חושבת שכל הנושא הזה, ההיבט הזה מאוד חסר גם בהתייחסות של יהדות ישראל, יחסי יהדות ארצות הברית, וגם בכלל התפוצות, וגם אנשים עם מוגבלויות, תחשבו, אנשים עם מוגבלויות רק במדינת ישראל זה קרוב ל2 מיליון איש, תחשבו כמה נמצא יהודים, תחשבו כמה נמצאים בכל הארץ, ואני מתכוונת כמובן גם לעבוד על זה. אז תודה.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for joining us. The first question for you comes from Yael from Spain.
Hi. Now the subtitle will be in Hebrew? Yes?
Yeah, I can speak. Yes.
Yes, I think you can start speaking.
All right, so I'm Yael. I represent the Spanish Union of Jewish Students, and thank you for being here, first of all. I wanted to ask you, after 4 years with an American administration that marginalized Europe in everything related to Middle East, Biden's position seems to be similar to the European one, regarding the nuclear agreement or the 2 states, for instance. How do you think Israel should change its foreign policy in the face of a Europe strengthened in its influence in the Middle East after the new Biden administration?
אוקיי, הכתוביות, חיכיתי לי שהם ייגמרו. בגדול, אני יכולה להגיד, אני מאוד מאמינה שישראל חייבת לפני הכל, ממשל אמריקאי, ממשל ביידן, ממשל טראמפ, לפני כל הדבר הזה, אני חושבת שמדינת ישראל קודם כל חייבת לבנות ולשמור על חוסנה הביטחוני, על המדינה, על הגבולות שלה, על האזרחים שלה, על ביטחון הפנים ועל ביטחון החוץ. זה עיקרון שחייבים לשמור עליו. אנחנו מדינה למודת מלחמות, עברנו גם כעם את השואה, ואי אפשר לסמוך על ממשל כזה או אחר, או על מדינה כזו או אחרת שתהיה איתנו לנצח ותשמור עלינו. מדינת ישראל צריכה לשמור על עצמה כמדינה מבפנים ומבחוץ. מבחינת השאלה שלך לגבי ממשל ביידן, אני חושבת שצריך לשמור קשר טוב עם הממשל האמריקאי, לא משנה אם זה ביידן, טראמפ או כל נבחר אחר לנשיאות ארצות הברית, אבל חשוב שישמור על הזהות שלנו ועל הביטחון שלנו כמדינה, הכל בהידברות כמובן, אבל אני יודעת שיש לנו יחסים טובים עם ארצות הברית, גם עם ממשל ביידן, ולהמשיך לעבוד בשיתוף פעולה ובצורה של הידברות, אבל לא לוותר על ערכי הביטחון של מדינת ישראל בשום פנים ואופן.
Thank you so much. And the next question, wait, I will just wait until the subtitles are finished. Thank you so much. And the next question comes from Ilan from the European Union of Jewish Students.
Thank you, Bini, and thank you, Shirley. Thanks a lot for being with us today. The discussion surrounding annexation was a major talking point among Jewish organizations based in Europe, particularly over the past year. But this discussion has been parked somewhat currently on the back of the Abraham Accords and subsequent normalization deals between Israel and other states. My question to you would be, where do you stand?
Sorry, I'm stopping you. Okay, the subtitle is okay. Continue.
Okay, thanks a lot. So my question to you would be, where do you sit on this issue? And what potentially damaging consequences do you think that annexation would have for Jewish students, Jewish young professionals and Jewish advocacy organizations in Europe?
אוקיי, תודה. שאלה שלך לפי הכתוביות, לא כל כך הבנתי לגמרי לגבי הנושא של סיפוח לדעתי, לא קיבלתי את השאלה הזאת גם מראש, אני כן יכולה להגיד שאני כשירלי מאוד אישה ימנית שמאמינה שמדינת ישראל היא מדינה של העם היהודי, ושטחי C אפשר למצוא איזשהו באמת הסדר לקדם את נושא הסיפוח, ובעצם נתינת ריבונות על שטחי C. גם דיברנו על זה גם בבחירות הקודמות, המפלגה מאוד מקדמת את זה, יש לנו גם מצע מסודר בנושא ובתחום הזה. כמובן שכרגע גם כל מגפת הקורונה, הנושא הריבונות הוא מאוד מאוד חשוב, אבל מגפת הקורונה שבטח אתם מרגישים את זה גם אצלכם במדינות, היא פגעה המון, גם בתעסוקה, גם בכלכלה, בפרנסה, בייחוד של האנשים פה. 400,000 מקומות עבודה עובדו במדינת ישראל, עסקים שקורסים ונסגרים מדי יום ולא יודעים איך הם יסיימו את החודש. אני חושבת שהמשבר הזה הוא המשבר הכי גדול שצריך להתמקד בו כרגע, ובאמת התחייבנו, נפתלי בנט בעצמו הצהיר ועשה המון למשך כל השנה בשביל להוציא את ישראל מהקורונה, וגם כשר ביטחון שהוא הקים את המלוניות שבטח שמעתם עליהם בשביל למגר את חולי הקורונה ולהצליח להחלים אותם, ולצערי באמת מדינת ישראל לא מתנהלת על זה בצורה שהיא ראויה, אם אפשר להגיד, והיא מגיבה מאוד מאוד מאוחר למגפה, ואנחנו גובים מחיר כבד, גם בתחלואה, גם בכלכלה וגם בייחוד של העם, באמון של העם במערכת, בממשלה, ואני מקווה שבכנסת הקרובה נוכל באמת להוציא את ישראל במגפת הקורונה ולממש את כל התוכניות האלה, אחר כך לחזור לדברים האחרים.
Thanks a lot for your reply, and if it's possible for me to have a response as well. I guess the focus of the question would be on what implications annexation would have on the diaspora itself. and at a time when annexation has been high as a discussion item for Jewish organizations in the diaspora and Jewish students, perhaps in particular. Sorry. My question would be: is there a realization of the impact that this could have on diaspora communities when taking part in policy discussions in the Yamina party?
רגע. אז כמו שאמרתי בתחילת התשובה שלי, ימינה כן דוגלת בהחלת ריבונות על שטחי C תחת מדינת ישראל. לגבי ההשלכות של ארגונים באירופה, אני חושבת באופן אישי כשירלי שתמיד יהיו אנשים שיהיו בעד ויהיו נגד, צריך לראות איך עושים את הדברים, אבל אין דבר כזה לרצות את כולם בשום דבר, אי אפשר שכולם יהיו בעד וכולם יהיו נגד. זה נושא שצריך באמת לשים לב איך עושים אותו, איך מכילים את הריבונות על שטחי C בצורה שמאפשרת את זה ולא פוגעת אחד, אבל אני מאמינה שזה אפשרי.
Okay, Shirley, thank you for joining us this evening.
אתה מסמן, יפה. תודה רבה.
Also from my side, thank you so much. I unfortunately do not speak sign language, but still thank you so much for joining us tonight and have a great evening.
Thank you very much for everyone. Thank you for the subtitle. It's very important and thank you. תודה שהנגשתם.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so we'll be moving towards our last guest for tonight. So our last guest is Rabbi Gilad Kariv, number 4 on Avoda's list, labor. Gilad Kariv, the floor is yours.
So I understand we are doing it in English, right?
Yes, ideally, yes. Most of our viewers don't speak Hebrew, I guess, including me. I don't speak Hebrew very well, so.
Okay. So, shalom, dear friends. It's wonderful to be here with you. This is for us a very joyous evening. I don't know if you had already the time to read the headlines in the Israeli English-speaking media channels. But few hours ago, the Israeli Supreme Court released a ruling forcing full recognition of reform and conservative conversions here in Israel. This is another major step of the non-Orthodox denominations of the Reform movement and the conservative movement towards a much more egalitarian reality, and for an era in which the state of Israel will keep its promise to the Jewish world and to the Jewish people that freedom of religion and conscience and full recognition of all streams of Judaism will be one of the core values of our Jewish and democratic state. So for me, as one of the leaders of the Israeli Reform movement and as a candidate, a leading candidate of the Labour Party, this is a very festive evening to be with you. And I'm not surprised by the fact that the ultra-Orthodox parties, but unfortunately also the right-wing parties, including Shirley's party, Yamina, and unfortunately also the Likud, went publicly against the Supreme Court ruling. If it is not enough that Prime Minister Netanyahu harmed the relations between Israel and the Jewish world when he canceled the agreement around the egalitarian prayers in the Western Wall, he is now not even willing to defend the inclusive nature of the law of return. Now, this is an opening statement that has to do not only with the fact that I'm a Reform rabbi, but also with the fact that I'm a candidate of the Labour Party. It will be the first time that a Reform rabbi, a non-Orthodox rabbi, will be in the Israeli Knesset. the ultra-Orthodox responses to me becoming a candidate after the primaries in the Labour Party were quite rough, but we are following the traditional way of the Labour Party. On the one hand, we don't take part in an incitement against any sector in the Israeli society. And at the same time, we are saying in a very clear way that Zionism, the basic concept of Jewish and democratic state, demands us to promote freedom of religion and full recognition for all Jewish streams. Now, I'm glad to represent a party which is the only Israeli party led by a woman, and the only Israeli party that ran primaries and internal democratic procedures in order to set its list to the Knesset. We are tired from people that are talking about democracy but failing to implement it in their own parties. And one of the main flags of the Labour Party is issue of gender equality, equality in general, and gender equality and equality to the LGBTQ community. When it comes to the relations with the Jewish diaspora, with Jewish communities overseas, I think it is quite clear where we stand. We are standing against the policies led by Prime Minister Netanyahu with his ultra-Orthodox and ultra-nationalist partners. Netanyahu's coalition, including Naftali Bennett, and unfortunately including the new party of Gideon Sa'ar, stood against the concept of religious pluralism. 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐚, a prominent candidate in Gideon Sa'ar's party, was one of the few ministers that voted originally against the Kotel agreement. So it's quite clear, if you follow Bibi Netanyahu or you belong to the right-wing bloc, you don't support religious pluralism and Jewish diversity. And the Labour Party always was the anchor in our political bloc that promoted full recognition of all streams and a welcoming, inclusive approach towards all Jewish communities without feeling the need to incite against the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, or any other sector. And I give you my word that as the first Reform Rabbi in the Israeli Knesset, my main duty will be to deal with those issues, to restore and reconstruct the relations with the world Jewry and promote Jewish diversity and pluralism.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Karev. The first question comes from Belgium, from Elsa.
Hi, Elsa.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Elsa, and I'm from Jewish Student Union of Belgium. So, as you would be the first Reform Rabbi in Knesset's history, the big question of Israel's relation with religion is all the more important. Therefore, my question is, how do you see Israel as a Jewish state while at the same time separate state and religion? What is the situation now and what would need to change? And what concrete step would Avoda take in that direction?
So I would like to suggest that the simple and clear answer is written in the founding document of the State of Israel, in Israel's Declaration of Independence. And in this constitutional founding document, it is stated in a very clear manner that Israel is a Jewish state because this is the nation state of the Jewish people. But at the same time, following Herzl's vision and the original Zionist philosophy, Israel will guarantee freedom of religion and conscience for all Jews and for all its citizens, including those that are not Jewish. And in that regard, the current reality in Israel is going directly against the core founding values of Zionism and the State of Israel. There is no reason why the only Western developed country in which Jewish communities are being discriminated on the basis of faith is the Jewish state. This is an absurd. This is a crazy reality. Now, it has nothing to do with a clear ideology, because when you check all the surveys you can see that there is a very strong majority among Israelis in general and Israeli Jews in particular to end the Orthodox monopoly over marriage and divorce, to end the Orthodox monopoly that prevents public transportation on Shabbat, to recognize all streams of Judaism. And the only reason why this majority is not being translated into a political and legislative reality is the way that the Israeli democratic system is working. And what we need to do is to galvanize the existing majority and to work hard in order to promote a freedom of religion, civil marriage and divorce, full recognition in all streams of Judaism, equal funding for all religious and cultural institutions, identifying secular Judaism as a legitimate ideological force in the Jewish people, not as an empty carriage, but as a very Jewish alternative. And in that regard, Merav Michaeli, the chairperson of our party, before I was elected to a candidate, submitted
I think we lost Rabbi 𝐤𝐿 for a second. Is it just me or has everyone lost Rabbi 𝐤𝐿?
Not only you.
Okay, so let's give it a second. These are the challenges, some of the challenges of hosting online conferences. We'll hope that Rabbi 𝐤𝐿 will be able to join us again soon, as he was in the middle of a very interesting answer. Rabbi 𝐤𝐿, can you hear us at the moment? We have lost Rabbi 𝐤𝐿 at the moment. Just give us a minute to solve the technical issue. Rabbi 𝐤𝐿 was also the last candidate to address us today, so there's no one that we can move up while we are solving the technical issue. So just bear with us for a minute until we are solving that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you again. Rabbi 𝐤𝐿? We could hear you for a second, but...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what happened, and I hope you also can see me. So I'm saying I'm continuing from where I stopped. The Labour Party is committed to the core Zionist and democratic values of the State of Israel, the Declaration of Independence, and we will work hard to promote them in any given coalition. It is quite clear that in order to achieve this goal, we need to end. Just a minute now. We need to end and to move a new political.
Rabbi 𝐤𝐿, unfortunately,
I will add just one. As a European student, I'm sure, Elsa, that you are aware to the fact that there are different separation between religion and state, and the American model of full separation is not the only democratic model. And it's quite clear that in a state that defines itself as a Jewish and democratic state, the American model is less relevant. But it doesn't mean that we need to go to the other end and to adopt a theocratic model that was never the case in Judaism, that was never part of the Jewish history, and definitely should not be a part of the modern Jewish sovereignty.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Yes, thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
And it's great to also be hearing you again. The next question comes from Italy, from Luca.
Hi, I'm Luca Spizzichino. I'm a chief editor of 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐿, that is the official media outlet of the Italian Union of Jewish Students. In recent weeks, the friction between the party and the Arab representation, with which there was has always been a good collaboration, made news. What was the cause of this friction, and will there be a mending of the relations?
I'm not so sure that I heard the opening sentence of your question. You're talking about the relations between the Jewish majority and the Arab minority?
About the candidacy of the Arab representative that is not so good seen by the Arab representation of the party. The seventh.
You'll have to apologize me because I'm getting calls from the Israeli media, so they are interrupting our Zoom. I'll ask you for the last time. You're talking about the candidacy of?
Marana.
Marana.
The
okay.
seventh.
Okay, look, I will be very transparent and open with you. We are all feeling that those posts that were published by Ibtissam Marana 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and 12 years ago are totally not accepted. Okay, and they go against our Zionist values. They go against our the way we picture the relations between Jews and Arabs in Israel, and they are totally not. Those posts and those expressions and statements are totally not accepted. Yet, I ask you to keep in mind that we are talking only about a few statements that were presented almost a decade ago or even more, and that Ibtissam Marana, that was elected in democratic primaries, the only primaries towards the coming elections, is known in Israel as an activist in this area of coexistence, fighting against violence mainly inside the Arab community itself, working day and night to promote LGBTQ rights inside the Israeli Arab sector, working against domestic violence in her own community and other Israeli communities. She married a Jewish person. Her mother-in-law is a Holocaust survivor. She's educating her daughter in a Hebrew-speaking public school in Jaffa, celebrating all Jewish holidays. So I'm not defending in any way her past statements, but once this activist stood in front of the nation in the leading news show, apologized, described their own past expressions as lame and not acceptable. And once the Israeli Supreme Court said only a day ago, there is no reason to prevent her from being a Knesset member, we should place this issue aside. And the reason we need to do it is because we must understand that the campaign against Ibtissam Marana is mainly fueled by the ultra-nationalist parties in Israel and by the Likud party and the prime minister that basically establish a covenant, a political ideological covenant with the successors of the late Rav Kahana, the racist and extreme anti-democratic Israeli politician that was murdered in a terror attack. But again, he was banished by the Likud itself, the Likud of Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir. And today, Prime Minister Netanyahu established a political alliance with the most extreme racist and anti-democratic forces in the Jewish Israeli politics. And at the same time, he is working with the Islamic movement that left the United Arab list because they want to quietly work with the prime minister. So, friends, look, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Likud governments harmed dramatically the relations between the Jewish majority and the Arab minority in Israel. The nation-state basic law didn't promote in any manner, in any way, the Zionist values and the Zionist character of the state of Israel. On the contrary, he helped those that are working against Zionism to say, you see, they legislated a nation-state basic law, but they refrained from mentioning the word democracy and equality. So we are saying in a very courageous way, the Labour Party, as a Zionist party, will do its best to reestablish, to heal the relations not only between Israel and world Jewry, but also the relations inside the Israeli society, mainly between the Jewish majority and the Arab. This is for us the beginning of implementing the idea that for once the Jewish people is the majority, so we need to carry with us the burden, the moral burden of being a majority that treats the minorities in an inclusive, welcoming, and egalitarian ways. Now, please, don't expect Israeli Arabs to be Zionists. By definition, if you want to have an Arab leader in your Zionist list, by definition, it's not going to be an Israeli citizen that feels totally comfortable with having 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐚𝐭 as the only national anthem. It doesn't mean that they need to accept what he thinks about the symbols of the state. But at least we need to be decent enough and to understand that if we are eager to promote shared society and coexistence in Israel, we need to embrace the fact that the Arab minority is not holding a same narrative and the same historic story that we are holding, and Zionism is strong enough, the Jewish state is strong enough, the Jewish majority is strong enough in order to be inclusive towards the narrative of the Arab citizens of Israel.
Rabbi Karif, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Also to you, all the best of luck for the rest of the campaign. And hopefully see you soon. Have a great evening.
Thank you, friends. Shalom. We're waiting for you in Israel. We hope to see you soon visiting us. Thank you all for what you're doing in your communities.
Thank you so much. And I think something that we all share is that we want to be able to travel to Israel again at some point soon. On this note, this concludes our program. This concludes tonight's event. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I especially want to thank 𝐈𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐚𝐿, our Jewish agency Shaliach at EUGS, for organizing this event. He has really done an amazing job putting all of this together. And I want to thank even more all the Jewish student leaders that have prepared questions for tonight, that have challenged Israeli politicians, that have challenged and made their voices heard in some ways or another on issues of importance to us. EUGS will continue to be engaging on the Israeli elections and on the issue of Europe and Israel relations more broadly and on Zionism. And we will most likely have another program shortly before the election and with experts talking about the likely outcomes. We might also host an election night live panel. Please let us know if that is something that you would appreciate. And around Yom Ha'atzmaut, we will once again launch our Theodore and I campaign, where young European Jews can reflect on what Zionism means to them. This concludes tonight's event. Thank you all so much. Have a good night. And if you live in Israel, if you are Israeli, don't forget to vote.